Now here's what we're going to call the dietary pleasure trap. And this is a chart out of Dr. Goldhammer's in my book by that same title, The Pleasure Trap. And what's happening here is we're seeing that in the first of the 5 sections, we're seeing how we're supposed to have a relationship to food. That we're actually supposed to be enjoying our food at a normal range. But then in the second phase, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce supernormal food, food that is hyper-concentrated, where there's far more energy or calories in it per bite. And as a result, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lift in the dopamine circuitry. You know, I have to say I've never liked this chart. Here we go. This is a better chart. Now, this is how this is going to work. You see in phase 1, this is whole natural foods. These are the foods that we were designed by nature to eat, and we're supposed to like them, and we do. However, in phase 2, if you introduce junk food, all the foods that people really love, if you introduce those foods, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lift in the dopamine circuitry. Because that food is richer, there's more calories per bite once we strip away all the healthy fiber and water and minerals and vitamins from food, and we leave just behind super concentrated food like oil, sugar, salty materials, cheese, etc. All these kinds of really rich foods, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lift in the experience. And the individual is going to say, that is great. There's more energy per bite here. This must be the right thing to do. Now, what's going to happen is you might say, well, that's great. That's a nice high to live on. Why don't we just live there? If it costs me a few years, if it costs me being overweight, I get a little bit sick, look at how much more pleasure I get. But we don't get more pleasure because as we see, what's going to happen is we're going to get used to it. Whenever you have a very intense stimulus that's outside of the normal bounds of stimulation, what's going to happen is that the brain and the sensors are going to get dulled. They're going to defend themselves against that high-intensity stimulus, and they're going to back it down. And we're going to wind up in a process that we call habituation or neuroadaptation, where we're going to get used to it. This is what happens if you go into somebody's house at Christmas time and you smell the great Christmas tree, and it smells great for about 15 minutes, and then you get used to it, okay? And so that's what happens at stage 3. So stage 3 is now we have habituated to this very rich food, and now we're getting about the same amount of pleasure as we always got from food, except that now we're eating food that's super rich. And now here's the problem. Now we wind up with things like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. These are the problems that we start to see. And now this is about the time that you may get lucky, where you hear a John McDougall, a T. Colin Campbell, a Neil Barnard, a Dean Ornish. You hear a Caldwell Esselstyn. You hear someone that can help you go the right direction, and you recognize, I know what I need to do now. I need to go this direction instead of that direction. But when we do, when we go towards healthy food, we see what happens. We go to stage 4. So now we have the answer to the question that we started with. If we knew the right thing to do, why is it so difficult to do? The reason is, when you start at stage 1 and go to stage 2, when you do the wrong thing, it feels right. And when you're at stage 3 and you go to stage 4, you do the correct thing and it feels wrong. Your motivational system is spun 180 degrees against this problem. Every instinct in you is telling you to seek the most pleasure for the least pain and the least effort. But when you do that in the modern environment, you're taking in cues that are fooling the system and pulling us right into what we call the pleasure trap. Now, how do we get out of this? What we do is we go through stage 4 to stage 5. That's essentially recovery. And if we do that, we get more and more sensitive. The food tastes better. The problem is that takes several weeks to accomplish that, and that's a several-week journey that very few people will ever make.